Okay, thank you for coming. Today's session on the scholarships and fellowships will be going over the DoD SMART Scholarship primarily, but we'll also briefly talk about the cybersecurity scholarship program, as well as some graduate fellowship programs from the Department of Defense and National Science Foundation. I'm Lance Scandella. I'm a professor in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering and the director of the University of Massachusetts Cybersecurity Center, a national security agency, Department of Homeland Security, Center of Academic Excellence in Cyber Defense Research. And that designation entitles students who are enrolled at or applying to UMass Dartmouth to apply for certain fellowships that would not otherwise be available, specifically the DoD Cyber Scholarship Program. But today we're going to focus primarily on the SMART Scholarship Program. And it's also known as a scholarship for service. We'll cover the domains, what your majors are and if you're eligible or not. But we're going to run through some key information available on the website to help you get started to decide whether or not the SMART program is for you. Okay, so down on the front page here, obviously the most positive aspects of this program are that you get full tuition. That's nice. You get stipends. They are proportional to your career stage, whether you're a bachelor's student or a master's student or a PhD student. It also, gives you a stipend for your books. And so it's a really good deal. You get paid. You have your tuition paid as well. And you get some supplies. Again, like I said, the stipend, you can see that the range. So bachelor students get $25,000 a year, and PhD students $38,000 a year. Those are very competitive stipends relative to what many professors are able to offer from their grants from federal funding agencies, and more generous than the stipends that departments are able to pay for teaching assistantships. So it's nice in that it gives you the freedom to study and do research without having to do service duties like grading and so on that would come with a teaching assistantship. And the other nice benefit is that you get summer internships, and they're paid. They don't make you work for free in summer. They understand that you need to work to live and earn money. So the internship opportunities it's a requirement as part of the program. If you're funded for 1 year, then in that special case, you are not required to complete an internship. You simply transition directly to employment with what's known as a sponsoring facility. And we'll talk about that later on. But it's also a guaranteed job. So, you might ask, this is such a good deal, what's the catch? Well, the deal is that for every year you're funded, you get this full tuition waiver and stipend. You're expected to work at a sponsoring facility that you're matched with at the beginning of your award. And there are various stages described in the primary document. So what this means is, obviously, they want to find very talented students early on who are both academically talented as well as committed to a career working for the Department of Defense, proportional to the number of years that the government supports your education, whether it's at the bachelor's, master's, or PhD level. So there is a compromise you need to decide if this is right for you. Maybe you want to have other career options available to you. But if you're happy with the thought of getting a guaranteed job at an organization that enables some level of professional development and is aligned with your research or your studies, then it's a good choice for you. And that's something you really need to decide for yourself. So when we look at, the about page, you can read, and again, these are the to make the information accessible to people who are really just looking for the visuals in our mobile application age. But again, many of the same benefits I've already mentioned. There's also health insurance and an experienced mentor, meaning you will, if you are awarded a scholarship, not only do you have a professor who's a mentor for your research, you also get a mentor on the other side at your sponsoring facility who will maybe be a coworker or a senior colleague someday when you go to work for that organization, as well as maybe a mentor during the periods of time when you do summer internships at your sponsoring facility. But again, I encourage you all to go through and read the details so that you understand, is it right for you? What do you need to do to have a complete application, and so on. And again, there is a list of eligibility requirements. You need to be a citizen of you can be a citizen of the United States. And if I could have a show of hands, is everybody a citizen of the United States? All right. But they also, as you can see, this is what's known as the Five Eyes Alliance, the native English speaking countries of the world. They all are eligible. So if a student from Britain was coming to study in the US, they could be eligible for this program, for example. You need to be 18 years or older at the time of award. So this year, it's fall 2021. You can see here that they're talking about your scholarship would start next fall. So you can do the calculation on how many years of support you would want based on the degree or the type of scholarship you're applying for, and starting from next year, because the review cycle is fairly detailed, and that process is described. There's not just after you apply, there's an internal review process and various stages of interviews and a timeline associated with that. So of course, you need to be eligible for at least a year of support. If you're graduating this fall, it wouldn't make sense. You need at least 2 semesters remaining from the start date of August 1st. And you need to be able to do the 1 year of internship, as I mentioned, if you're going to receive more than 2 or more years of support. You need to be willing to work for the DoD, and you need a minimum GPA of 3.0. However, it's of course a very competitive program, and the closer you are to a 4.0, the more competitive your application is going to be. That said, I would encourage you to apply to gain some experience. Unfortunately, I don't believe that applications, you get any feedback. So if you don't get it, you probably just get a form email that says, thank you for applying, but we're sorry, we can't offer you a scholarship. And there's a broad set of majors. And we're going to see that list. There's 21 different science, technology, engineering, and mathematics majors you can be enrolled in and be eligible. So I would imagine that all of you in this room and many other students in many other majors on campus are also eligible, even some in the business school. And there are certain application requirements in terms of, transcripts, letters of recommendation, and so on. And here's the list, right? Everything from aerospace and astronautical engineering, biosciences, biomedical, chemical, pretty much anything that ends in engineering. So the computer and computational sciences and computer engineering is both computer science and computer engineering. And then right below it, electrical engineering. You can also see mathematics and other areas of engineering, operations research, you might see in a math department or a business school, and so on. So if you're any one of these majors, you're eligible to apply, or studying in this primary field of discipline. If you have a double major, you would specify your primary discipline and we'll see some statistics on which degrees are most sought after or have the highest percentage success rate. And I would say don't be disappointed, because some will be higher and some will be lower, but that's the nature of the demand. If you apply to an organization that aligns with your major, aligns with their needs, that should enhance your chances of success. So don't just read into the numbers about what the success rates are. And as I said, you can be a graduate or an undergraduate, you're eligible. Now there's 2 types of awards, and for most of you in this audience, you would probably be seeking a recruitment scholar. That is the alternative to a retention scholar. So let me just explain what a retention scholar is to help you decide if that's your category. Probably not, but a retention scholar is somebody who already works for the Department of Defense and wants to go get that next degree and is talented. And that company, that organization, that sponsoring facility wants to retain that talent, and they're willing to let that student take some time off and focus on their education and further professional advancement. So if you're not a DoD employee, most likely you're a recruitment scholar, that is a talented civilian student at your, at some stage of your education who would be willing to accept civilian employment with a sponsoring facility, as not to be confused with many, basic question arises is, do I have to join the military? Well, there's a distinction. If somebody who works for the national, who joins the National Guard, even as a reservist, they're part of the military. This is civilian employment, meaning you're not deployed to be on the front lines. You're typically an engineer or a scientist supporting some aspect of the mission. Maybe you help research technologies or science that gets incorporated into what military users use. So you're supporting the overall mission of national security and homeland defense, but you are not a member of the military. So the vast majority of people with a college degree are civilian employees of the Department of Defense, for those who work, and it's the largest employer of engineers in the world. And then you also need to be eligible for a security clearance. Now, there's a lot of, misinformation or not really accurate information. It's basic things, rules. You have to be generally honest, not, have a criminal record. If maybe there's some good, good decision-making in certain circumstances, or bad decision-making. In fact, there was a news article just this past week about somebody trying to sell secrets to a foreign government, which would greatly compromise our ability to use those technologies against those potential adversaries. So I would say it this way, from my own personal experience, think of it as it's a life commitment. You're making a commitment to protect your country for your entire life, till death do us part. You must be, if you hold dual citizenship, you must be willing to give up that second citizenship. And, I find that, the world is a beautiful place, but when it comes to this concept of divided loyalties, national security and dual citizenship are unfortunately not. That doesn't mean you can't travel for leisure with family and so on, and, notifying your employer. Those are all possibilities. It might restrict where you can travel, but these are some of the compromises you make. Only if you take, say, very high levels of responsibility may you start to make more conservative decisions about foreign travel, for example, or who you disclose your affiliation to. But for the vast majority of civilian employees, you can take a European vacation without much difficulty. But just being a responsible adult, young adult, or of any age, not having a criminal record, not having debt, not being gambling, having addictions that might lead you to be in a position to which you could be compromised because somebody is aware of your need to pay off a debt because of an addiction you have, and so on. Use of drugs, again, in Massachusetts, certain drugs are legal for recreational use, but they are still generally frowned upon by these employers. So again, there is typically a duration. I believe that obviously convictions for, say, intent to sell or distribution of drugs is a much more serious consideration, which may lead to what's referred to as an adverse evaluation, meaning that one would potentially be denied their security clearance and not be eligible for employment. So these are all considerations one needs to make. And again, I can answer those questions in more detail, but like I said, I see it as a lifetime commitment to protect one's country of birth and the preservation of a way of life. Now, we don't need to go through the scholarship showcase, but interestingly enough, a former UMass Dartmouth recipient is among the showcase. It's David Haig. He's a former PhD student of John Buck. He completed his dissertation a few years ago and now works for the Naval Undersea Warfare Center. So you can find him in the list. I believe he's on the 6th or 7th page. There's about 40 former recipients profiled. And I suppose for those of you who have Dr. Buck as a student, he's a good resource for helping you understand what, I believe David is also a veteran. But, some of his students were not veterans. They were just civilians. And then let's look at sponsoring facilities. So there is a large list of sponsoring facilities. As you can see, there's a graphical representation. We can zoom in to our region of the world. And down here is the Naval Undersea Warfare Center. It's color-coded by service, so Air Force, Army, Navy, and other DoD sponsoring facilities. Maybe, for example, organizations that constitute the intelligence community might be under that category. There's a set of organizations, and you can find out about those organizations. There's even a Wikipedia page that lists both the federal as well as service-specific intelligence organizations. So there's, for example, the Office of Naval Intelligence for the Navy, as opposed to FBI, CIA, NSA, NGA, and other what they call the Big Five in the intel community. But you can also query by the location, those that support specific degrees and disciplines. So obviously, if you're a mathematician, then you want to find organizations that, if you're not a civil engineer, maybe certain branches of the United States Army Corps of Engineers wouldn't be a good fit for you. But they have the IT lab down in Vicksburg, Mississippi, where they do high performance computing for various types of systems engineering. So what you will find is, and I'm always impressed by the rich diversity of the types of research and engineering that these organizations do. And some of this you wouldn't learn about until you start at that organization. The same is true of the Department of Homeland Security, which is an umbrella organization for security. So what I would say is find a few organizations. Many of you may feel most comfortable staying in the region, working for the Naval Undersea Warfare Center in Newport, Rhode Island. But as you can see, there is a huge cluster of facilities in the Washington, D.C. area and Maryland. So again, you'd be surprised. Maybe some of your professors have associations with different organizations. I know I have contacts at a few, and other professors in electrical and computer engineering do as well, but they might not be recent. So again, find an advisor who will mentor you through the application process and help them, work with them to identify what should be your top 3 or 5 or however many sponsoring facilities you're allowed to specify. There's also a cluster out in Dayton, Ohio, because that's where the Air Force is. They have the Air Force Research Labs, Air Force Institute of Technology, and so on. So again, understanding why there are specific clusters of organizations. Huntsville, Alabama is where the Missile Defense Agency is, and other organizations. So there are these clusters where there are a large concentration of scientists and engineers. Look at them, for example, let's take a look. If we click on the Naval Undersea Warfare Center, we should be able to go to this link, and then we would get additional details on the areas. For example, they have cybersecurity as one option, but obviously lots of underwater related technologies, which some faculty in electrical and computer engineering are known for, because it's a good place to be if you want to collaborate with the neighboring facility. All right. And then resources, this is very valuable. There's a flyer that's not so informative. Just these flyers and brochures, but this handbook, it's about a 50-page document with all of the quote rules and regulations, and so these are the details, the fine print, so to speak. How does the scholarship cycle work? What are your rights and responsibilities as a recipient if you are successful? And how do you proceed? What are the rules you must abide by if you are awarded? So this is the important document to go through. maybe skim through before you apply and then read carefully before you accept to understand what you're committing to. So this is a valuable document. I read it cover to cover. Videos are popular in this day and age because some people are just connected to their mobile device. It's an easy way to disseminate information. So there's very short videos that are maybe a little superficial, that a more mature decision maker wouldn't feel comfortable going on just that information. That 50-page document I just showed you, I would be more comfortable understanding, reading the fine print, knowing what am I committing to. But the webinars, these are run by folks, these are employees in the SMART program who are full-time employed to administer this program. Essentially, they might be the ones who, share the applications through the computer software that was implemented and, handling the administrative aspects. So these are like literally maybe an hour or two long webinars. I went through the entire first one just to hear the kinds of questions that people ask. And sometimes interesting tidbits come out. This one was just a few months ago, about 2 months ago, in fact, and you can see that they're left there historically. And so I would say this is the most important one, simply because it's the most recent. Probably if any rules have changed, they might be here. Maybe those are summarized, but also the application deadline is November 1st. And why I wanted to run this information session as soon as possible to give you all a chance to think about, is this right for me? And give you at least a few weeks. 2 pages might not seem like a lot, but when it comes to writing a well thought out and revised essay that touches on all the points that are requested, it often takes multiple rounds of revision. When I write a proposal to an organization, I often spend tens of hours editing that document, writing and editing, because I want to make sure that it's like writing, a term paper, not just writing a short reaction piece. It's really got to be an integrated set of, here are my ideas and what I want to do. It's not something to be done a week before the deadline or in a single sitting. So let's take a look at award statistics, and this may excite some of you and upset some of you. We're looking at the 2021 statistics. You can see that the number of awards was 400. Of course, that's nationally, right? So the question is, what schools, what was the background of the people who got the award? Do I have a realistic chance? I mean, these are all questions we naturally ask. So here you go. Here's the average GPA, 3.67. That's the average, right? There could be some that are lower and some that are higher, but that's the average. So maybe, who knows, if it was approximately normally distributed, maybe it could be as low as a 3.5 and as high as a 4.0. I don't know, because the mean is just one value. It doesn't tell us. There might be some more qualified students or less academically outstanding students, but otherwise well-rounded and otherwise desirable and sought after by these employee organizations. So apparently 17% of people applied. So you got about a 1 in 5 chance, all things being equal. But maybe if you're above this number, you have a slightly higher chance. So don't read into statistics too much, because you are an individual and you have to make a decision. Am I competitive? And believe in yourself, keep trying, fail, and then try again, learn from experience, try to learn from your peers or your seniors who are successful and who are willing to share their experiences with you. You can see that of the awards, the vast majority went to undergraduates, but that might also be because there are more undergraduates applying. It doesn't necessarily mean it's harder for a master's or a PhD student to get. Personally, in my opinion, many students, and I understand, right? School can be many hard years and we just want to get out and get some real life experience working. But I would say that if you have to make the decision between the master's and the PhD and you're successful and you could get funding for a full PhD, in retrospect, that would be a great deal, in my personal opinion. So if you have a mentor who's trying to convince you to do the PhD instead of the master's, have a more detailed conversation with them to see if, what are you giving up and what are you getting for in return? In my opinion, the master's is financially a great step up from the bachelor's. The PhD, it's not that you won't get rich, but to me, the primary reward of a PhD is the intellectual gratification and intellectual freedom you get to do your research as, for example, a professor. Maybe you also get a lot of intellectual freedom in a research environment, whether it's a government lab or the kind of ecosystem organizations that they work with, the federally funded research and development centers, or the university affiliated research centers that do a lot of the research for the services themselves. Just my personal opinion. So let's take a look at a few, and if there's anybody in the audience who wants to see some of the others, but let's take a look at percentage awarded by discipline. So in other words, let's go, I know we have some computer engineers, we'll start with that. We can see that a lot of computer engineers and computer scientists got awarded this. Let's look at electrical engineers. Now, a lot of electrical engineers. And now let's look at, say, for example, mathematics, right? Mathematics is lower, but one also needs to think a lot less people are willing to do a mathematics degree. And so in my knowledge, the rate of degree production at the PhD level, for example, in mathematics versus, for example, electrical engineering or computer science might be 4-to-1. So these numbers aren't an artifact of we want engineers more than mathematicians. It's what students study these days, what they have an aptitude for, and what they excel in. So I wouldn't read too much into these numbers to say, if I'm a math major, my chances are lower. Well, in some ways, mathematicians have a much higher success rate in other areas in their academic pursuits. Okay. We can even go query the schools that have been recipients. And what's nice to know is we can see that University of Massachusetts Dartmouth is on this list. So we can see all of the years in which a student from this university has received a SMART scholarship. And you can see here the results are, there have been 6 successful recipients in these years from 2010 to just last year. So there have been, and the sponsoring service has almost exclusively been the Navy, simply because NUIC, or Naval Undersea Warfare Center in Newport, Rhode Island, is the local choice, and they're a big employer of our graduates. So yes, NUIC might be a good choice if your studies align with what they employ people to do, and a professor has a good relationship with folks at one of the divisions that, or codes as they're called, where you might work. But like I said, there's no reason why you couldn't explore outside the region. We've had students undertake very competitive internships at various organizations in Washington, DC, California, and other parts of the country. So again, understand that, at various stages of life, you feel like you want to stay closer to home, or you're ready to get out and strike your fortune. But again, you can see historically, UMass Dartmouth students have basically been paired with the Naval Undersea Warfare Center as the sponsoring facility. I'm hoping that we'll put some other facilities on the board soon, but that's our historical track record. Now, I'm not going to look at these because unfortunately, a lot of the events, which is something kind of like what I'm doing here, but from people who run the programs, they're not really nearby us. So there are events, but you'd have to travel for them. Maybe they go to Boston, but they don't come to our neck of the woods. And the same, they might have some in, big cities, but if we can't get there for that day, then, we have to watch the webinar like everybody else. And then there are the application instructions. I'm not going to go through these in detail. I'm going to look at this briefly, and then I'm going to stop for questions. But as you can see, I believe I misspoke already. The deadline is December 1st, not November 1st, 5 p.m. Eastern time. The computer system shuts off. You will, if you try to submit at 5:05, you have your finished essay, it will not be accepted. You are out of luck. Try again next year. It's that strict. And that's why we make sure we're prepared in advance. You can see this set of links. Of course, you have to acknowledge that you're using their information system. You're going to submit your documents, including some like your transcripts, and that there are risks associated with, hopefully the scholarship, sponsor for the DoD knows how to protect their students, but you're acknowledging the risk of submitting your documents. Again, the proposed award details, personal statement. This is the essay, getting references from your professor, or maybe if you've had an internship at one of these DoD facilities where you'd like to specify as one of your top choices, or getting a reference from them is also a good idea, because of course they may be able to coordinate with their colleagues at the organization. Again, I don't know, but again, they're trying to identify good candidates who are going to be, willing to commit to a career in DoD for a duration proportional, at least to, and maybe after that number of years, you like it, you've been promoted, you like what you're doing, you want to stay. Maybe you go to another different government organization and you're still contributing to the national security mission. These are all acceptable. And once you've fulfilled the terms of service, the duration, you're free to go in what direction you feel at that point in time. So there are instructions here. I'd like, again, I've read you through, and what I've understood about the application process, I want to apply, but unfortunately I'm not eligible anymore. I don't think they wouldn't give me leave to go study again, but being a student's nice. So I would encourage you to get into the details for the application and, make sure you know what the components of a complete application are, study that yourself, and reach out to a mentor to work with you on the essay writing and reference providing. Always ask in advance. Don't ask a professor 2 days before the deadline, because they have a lot of deadlines that are rolling. Of course, be professional and ask in advance. But again, the more information you provide them, the easier it is for them to say yes. So for example, at more senior stages of your career, oftentimes you need to draft a letter of recommendation for yourself. And that seems kind of awkward, but think of it this way, right? By writing an essay or a draft, it can be a short number of paragraphs, just one page, but you're telling the professor what you want them to say about you, what you want them to emphasize about your strengths and why you're a good fit, because they might not have the time to read all of these details themselves. So by you giving them the draft letter, they understand what the message you're trying to, they would hope you would deliver on your behalf to the organization you're applying to. And so again, they're professional. We as faculty, we provide dozens of letters of reference every year for students applying for various types of opportunities, internships, employment, scholarships, fellowships. And so we understand the general, but giving that draft letter really helps. And of course, sharing, say, for example, a resume that enables them to speak to, they've had these relevant experiences, because maybe the professor knows something about that organization and what they need and says, look at your resume, you've had this experience. That's relevant to what they need. I want to play that up because it's a strength of yours. So helping your reference providers understand what you're trying to do and where you're coming from as an individual, as a student, and as a person will help them help you succeed. So there's the link here. Go sign up, check it out, go read through the details. There's lots of questions. This might be for organizations, but those are the primary things I wanted to go over with you.